Hey guys, Tom Barclay here. I just wanted to do a video on two of Tottenham's centre-backs right now, albeit one is not really supposed to be a centre-back, but he's playing very, very well there. One, Kevin Danso, and one, Archie Gray. The reason for doing Gray is he's just won an award as of last night, so it seems quite relevant to talk about him. But Kevin Danso more specifically because we spoke to him in the mix zone after the Manchester City defeat, and some of his quotes were quite interesting, so I thought I'd do a little video on him and what an impact I think he's made so far. So let's start with Danso. So just onto some of those quotes that he gave us. In it, he revealed that he actually could have been a rugby player rather than a footballer, which might explain some of his physicality and his bravery in the tackle and putting his head in where it hurts. So it turns out, so Kevin Danso was born in Austria to Ghanaian parents, but I think about the age of 6 he came over and lived in Milton Keynes. That's where he grew up. He was in Reading's, I suppose a little bit earlier than academy, more underage groups, and then moved to MK under 9 till about 15, 16 before then he went to Augsburg. But anyway, at the same time, he was playing a lot of rugby, and he says up until about 14, that's when he had to sort of make a decision because he was that good at it. We only literally got a few minutes in this in the mix zone. It's often how it works. So I couldn't go into too much detail about his position or what he thought of James Maddison's rugby tackle and Savinho. That would have been a good question. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, but we still got enough out of him to talk about this. So yeah, he was playing rugby a lot and looked like he had a genuine chance at being a player, to the point where he was actually getting scholarship offers from rugby clubs and private schools. And he was just left with having to make a decision, as often footballers or sports people who are often good at lots of sports have to make a choice which one to pursue. And because of the risk of injury was one of the reasons why he, with rugby in particular, and it just getting a bit more serious, he decided to focus on football. But I just thought it was quite interesting that he could have been a rugby player. It shows his sort of multi-talented Kevin Danso is. And when you speak to him, he speaks so well. He definitely, with respect to your average footballer, he is a little bit more articulate, and I was very impressed with him on that front. And maybe that sort of rugby background and that committed approach has led to the committed approach he has on the pitch as a footballer. He says he likes to put his body on the line and put his body in the way of sort of danger. That's his identity. As a centre-back, I've really got a sense of someone who really understands his game now at age 26 compared to the player that I watched briefly at Southampton all those years ago. And on that front, I mean, at Southampton, he came in on loan under Ralph Hasenhüttl in the 1920 season, which I think was the season that was curtailed by COVID. So that obviously didn't help. He came on loan and was a young player there. He only played about 10 games. One game he played in, he came off the bench in that horrendous 9-0 home defeat to Leicester, in which Maddison scored, which will go down in infamy, really, for terrible results in the Premier League. But I think he came on at half-time when the score was sort of 5-0 or so. So I don't know how much you can really blame him, although they did concede a lot of goals in the second half. But he didn't really get that much of a look in. In fact, his final game, I think, was against Spurs in a draw, in which Son scored, but Saints scored quite late on through Sofiane Boufal, another player where it didn't really work out at Southampton. But I don't think you would have witnessed him then and really sort of envisaged him going on to be the player he has. But as he pointed out when I asked him that question about how far he feels he's come since Southampton, experience in football is everything. Which, leading on to Archie Gray in a minute, it sort of underlines how brilliantly he's doing, because he's not an experienced player and he's handling that situation really, really well. But for your average player, or most players, experience is absolutely crucial. And that's what Danso pointed to. He said, yes, back then I made quite a few mistakes at Southampton, but then he went to Augsburg, played a lot in Germany, had that loan to Fortuna Düsseldorf. I say he went to Augsburg, I mean he was on loan from Augsburg to Southampton, but he played a bit there. And then obviously went to RC Lens, where he had 3 years really honing his craft in Ligue 1. He talks about coming up against the likes of Mbappe and Dembele and these absolutely world-class players, and how it helped his game. And he really, really kicked on from there. And I think we saw it in the Euros in Ralf Rangnick's Austria side, who were probably one of the most exciting and better teams in that in that Euros. They obviously went out in the end. Not it didn't go as far as maybe it suggested that they might have done, given how well they were performing at the start. But they were certainly a bit of a surprise package, particularly as Ralph Rangnick for fans in England. The last time we sort of saw of him was a disaster at Manchester United, albeit, seeing what's happened since, perhaps it wasn't as bad on reflection. But Danso was at the heart of that team and at centre-back and was excellent. And I just really think he's done brilliantly since coming in at Spurs. I think, I've said this a few times, I feel like he's really smart bit of recruitment. He really fits in to the Postecoglou style of play. I think fans have appreciated him already. In fact, they were chanting his name at Ipswich. They were chanting his name against Manchester City. Super Kevin Danso, and in the sort of tune of how Frank Lampard used to have his name sung. He's brave in the tackle and in challenges and blocking and putting his body on the line, but he's also brave in his passing and his play on the ball. He'll do things that a lot of centre backs just wouldn't. He's good with his feet. He tries little turns and stuff which have come off so far, at least, which have got himself out of danger. He backs himself, I suppose, to play out from the back and play himself out of difficult situations, which is just the kind of player that Postecoglou needs, I think. And with his passing, some of his attempts to pass the ball down the pitch into tight areas are really ambitious, I suppose. So he just feels like a really smart bit of recruitment. Bear in mind it's a loan until the end of the season with an obligation of about £20 million. I think that's good value for his age, where he's at in his career and the kind of player he is. I think it's really, really smart, and Tottenham and Johan Langer and Ange and everyone at the club should be congratulated on him. And so far, I think he's looked really, really good. And finally, on Kevin Danso, because he was at MK Dons, we asked him about whether he knew Dele, because obviously Dele came through at MK Dons as well. He said he did know him, but Dele was a couple of years, maybe 2 or 3 years up his age group. Funny enough, Danso actually played 3 years up his age group, but then so did Dele at MK Dons. So Danso didn't really play with him at the time. He played with a lot of Dele's sort of contemporaries, same age group, but not with Dele because he was playing up the age group. But he said, if I can have a career as good as Dele has had at Spurs, then he'd be very pleased. And obviously Dele's had one of the best careers in recent Tottenham history. I know it obviously came to a much quicker end than people were expecting, and it's been a difficult last few years. He's now in Como, and fingers crossed he can get playing again. But when he was at his peak, in those sort of late teenage years, early 20s, he was brilliant. He was such a great player, both for Tottenham and for England. It's sad to see what sort of, his career sort of coming to a much more abrupt halt, I suppose, than people were expecting. But if you remember what a player he was absolutely fantastic. And on the note of Dele, this might lead me quite neatly onto Archie Gray. So Archie Gray has won the Young Player of the Year award at the London Football Awards last night, which is an award that Dele won twice in 2016 and 2017, back-to-back awards, underlining what a great player he was. Harry Kane won it the year before that in 2015, so good pedigree from Tottenham's point of view here. And Archie, to be fair, has done well to see off some strong competition. Ethan Nwaneri and Mars Lewis-Skelly at Arsenal, who've had really good breakthrough seasons. Watford's Rocco Vata, who I can't claim to know too much about, I haven't really followed too much of Watford this season. And Ramon Esse, who moved to Crystal Palace from Millwall in the January window, who I do know quite a lot about because, not that you'll be interested on the Spurs point of view, but I've been doing a piece ahead of Crystal Palace playing Millwall in the FA Cup this weekend, speaking to his old boss Gary Rowett about Roman Esse, who sounds like a real talent. It sounds like from Crystal Palace's point of view, he could well be the next cab off the rank. He signed for about $14.5 million in the January window, and he hasn't really played much so far. But I wouldn't be surprised if they were to sell someone like Eberechi Eze at some point. Who knows, maybe to Spurs, then he might sort of come in to fill in that void. He looks like a really talented player. But anyway, great news for Archie Gray winning that. Sort of underlines what a fantastic season he's had. And looking at his numbers, he's featured in 33 of the 42 games Spurs have had this season. He started 25 games, which I think is probably more than he maybe could have expected when he signed, albeit obviously most of them at centre-back. He started 19 of the last 20 games that Spurs have had, 16 of those at centre-back, and he's done brilliantly. I mean, a bit of context, I suppose. He is actually the fourth most expensive 18-year-old in world football ever, beaten by the three Real Madrid Brazilian lads, Endrick being the most expensive, around 45 million pounds, something like that, and then Vinny Jr. and Rodrigo just below Endrick, and then it's Archie Gray on about 40 million. I think it was 30 million plus Joe Rodon worth about 10 million, so it counts to about 40 million. So he didn't come cheap. It's a lot of money. And for Tottenham, who don't spend, they don't spend £100 million on players, so 40 million is a fair whack. But I think he's already looked value for money, and it's really exciting seeing what he's going to do going forward. I mean, just in recent games, he's had some real challenges. I thought Liam Delap really gave him a tough time in the opening stages against Ipswich, and to be honest, Spurs were very lucky not to have conceded in those early stages when Delap sort of got in behind Gray on a few occasions. But having got through that luck, Gray sort of grew into the game, grew into the challenge against Delap, and managed to nullify him throughout the match, and sort of gave Spurs a platform to go on and win that game. I just think he's done really, really well, particularly playing out of position. His speed is more impressive than I was expecting at times. His obviously ability to play off the back, played some lovely passes, including that one to Son in the lead up to that goal for Brennan Johnson, the opener against Ipswich. He's got a lovely way of passing, and he's just done a brilliant job. And Postecoglou just loves him to bits. The big question, I suppose, regarding Archie Gray, which people keep asking, is when will he play holding midfield, and will he play holding midfield? If that is what he wants to be, I'm told he definitely still wants to be a midfielder. Not much about holding midfielder, but definitely a midfielder, not a defender. But I guess right now he's happy with the experience, and he's definitely the kind of character who just wants to do his all for the team and will do a job wherever his manager asks him. But it's an interesting one with Spurs going into the end of the season, because obviously they're missing defenders at the moment. In fact, they've got 4 centre-backs missing right now, so there's a reason Gray's playing. But if and when, and hopefully it's soon, Romero, Van der Ven, and hopefully Ben Davis, obviously Dragonson's out for the rest of the season, but those 3 are back, then this should be the chance. I would like to see Gray given a chance at holding midfield, because Bentancur, I think, is a really good player, and there's been talk of him getting a new contract, which would make sense because he's an excellent player, but I'm still not convinced holding midfield and Ange's team is really where he's best suited. Don't know if he's defensively sort of minded enough to play in that role. And Bissouma has been an interesting talking point in the last couple of games. He hasn't played a minute. And I just feel like maybe his chances at Spurs are coming to an end. I think he's got a year left on his contract in the summer. Would not be surprised if they moved him on. He's had a strange career at Spurs. It's been disrupted by injury, suspension, misdemeanors off the pitch, like at the start of the season when he obviously got Spurs basically imposed a 1-match suspension for him filming himself inhaling nitrous oxide rather inexplicably ahead of the first game of the season. Ange back then was saying how generally when Bissouma's been fit, he starts him and he backs him, but that hasn't really been the case as much of late, and I wonder if something has changed on that, whether he's sort of losing patience a little bit with Bissouma, who, as we know, can be a fantastic player on his day. He was brilliant under Postecoglou in that first sort of 6 weeks, but unfortunately we haven't seen it enough over the course of the season. In recent crucial games like Liverpool away and Aston Villa, he was poor, he gave the ball away. If he doesn't start, he's either not starting, or when he is starting, he's coming off quite soon. I just feel like he's maybe losing patience. And that holding midfield role going forward is absolutely crucial for Spurs. Either they go out and try and sign someone. Obviously, Rodri is the ideal player. Someone in that mould would be brilliant to really transform this team. Or they look to give Gray or maybe Bergvall the chance to really develop into that key player, to my mind. I mean, maybe Ange sees Bentancur as being the answer there. But I think I would love to see Gray get a chance to really nail that position down. I think he's got the passing range, the discipline, the fitness, the commitment to really develop into a brilliant player there. So it'll be fascinating to see what they do. And even if he does sort of nail that down, I still feel like maybe they could do with another one in the summer. But anyway, I thought I'd do, like I say, a video on Danso, the player who could be a rugby player, and Gray after winning this award. And I think Spurs have done really well with those two bits of recruitment. I don't think you can always give them 10 out of 10. And the last few years for their recruitment, I think some of the signings have been a bit off. Maybe Basuma, what proved to be a poor signing, maybe so far, if you analyse his time overall. Richarlison, mainly through injuries, struggled. But on these two, obviously it's early days for Danso perhaps, so there are great signs there. Whereas Gray, I think already looks like a really, really clever bit of business. And one that can be an absolutely fantastic player for Spurs for the long term. Anyway, cheers guys.